She was gone before anyone realized the convoy had stopped. Hello guys, welcome to my channel where interesting stories are told. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comment section below. It was a Tuesday afternoon on the Apapua-Shodi Expressway, the kind of Lagos traffic that swallowed time whole, gridlocked, loud, exhaust-thick air hanging over a river of cars that hadn't moved in 40 minutes. The black SUV carrying Zara Okonkwo, 17 years old and the only daughter of billionaire construction magnate Roland Okonkwo, sat third in a 4-vehicle security convoy. 2 armed escorts in front, 2 behind. A detail that had protected her, without incident for 3 years. Nobody planned for the tanker. A fuel tanker jackknifed across 2 lanes without warning, and the convoy fractured. Lead vehicles forced left, rear vehicles cut off entirely by the sudden wall of steel and chaos. In the confusion, doors were yanked open. There were voices, hands, and then Zara was gone. She was in the back of a windowless van for what felt like hours but was probably 40 minutes. She counted turns, left, right, long straight road, sharp right. She had done orienteering at her international school in Victoria Island. She had complained about it every Saturday morning. She was grateful for it now. When the van slowed at what sounded like a checkpoint, and both men in the front stepped out arguing with someone outside, Zara did not hesitate. She found the interior handle, discovered it hadn't been properly locked from the outside, pushed it open 2 inches, confirmed darkness, and rolled out onto the wet laterite ground of what appeared to be a back road somewhere on the Lagos mainland. She ran. She ran in the direction of noise, the specific low roar of a generator, and the metallic percussion of someone working with tools. She followed it down a narrow, unlit road lined with open gutters and compound walls until she nearly collapsed through the open gate of a roadside mechanic workshop. The sign above the gate, hand-painted in faded red and yellow, read, "Dele's Auto Repairs, God's Time is Best." Inside, underneath a raised Volkswagen with a flashlight in his mouth and a wrench in his hand, was Dele Ademi, 31 years old, lean and quietly strong, dark skin permanently traced with engine grease, wearing a worn Arsenal jersey with the number cut off the back and old work trousers tied at the waist with a piece of wire, because the button had gone 6 months ago and he hadn't gotten around to replacing it. He heard the footsteps and slid out from under the car. The girl standing in his workshop entrance was barefoot. She had lost her shoes somewhere on the road, wearing what he registered as an unusually expensive school uniform, now covered in mud and torn at the shoulder. Her face was composed in the specific way of someone who had decided that falling apart was not an available option right now. "Please," she said. Her voice was steady. "I need you not to ask questions for the next 5 minutes." Dele looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked past her into the dark road, then back at her. "5 minutes," he said. "Then I'm asking." He gave her water. He gave her the spare slippers he kept behind the toolbox. He did not ask questions for 5 minutes. When he finally did, she answered carefully, giving him just enough truth to justify his help without revealing anything that would change the nature of it. Her name was Zara. She had been in trouble on the road. She needed somewhere safe until morning. She did not tell him her last name. She did not tell him who her father was. She did not tell him that within the hour, her disappearance would be the lead story on every news channel in Nigeria, and that the man whose workshop she was now sitting in would have recognized her surname immediately. Some information, Zara understood, changed the way people looked at you. She needed Dele Ademi to look at her like a person first. Everything else could come later. Dele Ademi had a system for everything. Tools returned to exact positions after every job. Invoices written by hand in a red ledger he kept on a shelf above the workbench. Leftovers from his evening meal always covered and placed on the same corner of the small table in the back room where he ate alone most nights. He was not a complicated man, but he was a precise one, the kind of precision that comes not from privilege, but from understanding that, when you have little, disorder is a luxury you cannot afford. He gave Zara the back room. He spread a clean tarp over the narrow bench along the wall, folded his spare work jacket into something approximating a pillow, and told her the generator went off at 10 and came back on at 6. She thanked him with the quiet sincerity of someone unaccustomed to receiving help without conditions attached. He noticed that too, though he said nothing about it. He slept in the workshop, on the reclined seat of a customer's Camry that hadn't been collected in 3 weeks. By morning, Dele had already made his decision. He didn't know who this girl was or what she had run from, but whatever it was had left her barefoot on a back road at night, and that was enough information for any decent person to act on. He bought akara and ogi from the woman at the end of the street and set it on the table before she woke up. When Zara emerged from the back room, she stopped at the sight of the food and looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know," he replied, already back under a Kerala. What Dele couldn't know, was that 40 minutes away in a glass tower in Victoria Island, Roland Okonkwo had not slept. Roland was 62, broad and iron-shouldered, a self-made man whose face appeared on billboards along 3 major Lagos highways. He had built his empire from a single construction contract in 1994 and had spent every year since making sure nothing he loved could be taken from him. His only daughter had been taken from him in 40 minutes of traffic. He had deployed private security, contacted the Inspector General personally, and was now sitting in his office surrounded by people whose job was to solve problems, none of whom were solving this one fast enough. His phone had not left his hand in 18 hours. Back at the workshop, Zara was careful. She helped where she could, handing Dele tools he reached for, sweeping the workshop floor without being asked, staying away from the road-facing gate whenever vehicles slowed outside. She was strategic about her helpfulness in the way of someone who had been raised around people who understood leverage. But something about Dele disarmed her strategies. He didn't ask about her family. He didn't probe for details. He shared his lunch, rice and stew from a flask his neighbor misses. Bello sent over every afternoon, without ceremony or expectation. He taught her the names of 3 different wrenches when she asked what they were. He laughed at something on his small radio and then explained the joke when he caught her watching him. He was, Zara thought, the most uncomplicated person she had ever met, and she had grown up surrounded by very complicated people. On the second evening, a black SUV with tinted windows rolled slowly past the workshop gate for the 3rd time. Dele noticed it on the 2nd pass. He said nothing to Zara, but positioned himself between her and the gate with the casual naturalness of someone simply moving to get a better look at an engine. His hand rested near the heavy spanner on the workbench beside him. Zara noticed where his hand was. "They're looking for me," she said quietly. "I know," Dele replied, equally quietly. "Which ones? The ones who took you or the ones who want you back?" Zara looked at him carefully. He was still watching the gate. "I'm not sure yet," she said. "That's the problem." Dele nodded slowly, as though this was a perfectly reasonable answer, picked up the spanner with one hand, and went back to work. Outside, the SUV rolled past a 4th time and kept going. But it would be back. And when it returned, it would not be alone, because someone had just confirmed, through a source inside Roland Okonkwo's own security detail, that his daughter was alive, hidden, and exactly 3 streets from the Oshodi underpass. The same source who had coordinated her kidnapping in the first place. The message came through at 11:47 p.m. Dele saw it on the small television mounted on the workshop wall, the one he kept on NTA mostly for background noise during late jobs. The breaking news banner crossed the screen, and he set down his wrench slowly, wiping his hands on his trouser leg, reading the words twice because the first time didn't fully land. Missing, Zara Okonkwo, 17, daughter of billionaire Roland Okonkwo of Cross Continental Construction. Last seen Tuesday, a Papua Oshodi Expressway. 50 million reward for information leading to her safe return. Beneath the text, a school photograph. The girl asleep in his back room. Dele stood very still for a long moment. The generator hummed. A moth circled the single bulb above the workbench. He thought about the 50 million naira, a number so far outside the architecture of his daily life that it barely felt real. He thought about the akara he had bought her that morning for 300 naira. He thought about the way she had swept his workshop floor without being asked. Then he turned the television off and went back to work. He said nothing to her that night. In the morning, when Zara woke to find him already under a customer's hillocks, she brought him a cup of tea from the small gas burner in the back room and set it beside his feet without a word. He slid out, sat up, looked at her directly, and said, "Your father is Roland Okonkwo." It wasn't a question. Zara held his gaze. "Yes. There is 50 million naira, with my name on it if I make one phone call." "Yes," she said again. Her voice didn't shake. She had clearly already calculated this possibility and made her peace with it. Dele picked up the tea, drank, set it down. "Then you should probably tell me," he said, "why you didn't want me to know, because it wasn't just about being seen as a person first." He looked at her carefully. "You're scared of something specific, and I think it involves whoever is in that black SUV." Zara sat down on the overturned bucket across from him. And she told him everything. The convoy hadn't been ambushed by strangers. 2 days before the kidnapping, she had overheard a phone call, her father's head of security, a heavy-set man named Commander Balagun, speaking in a low, deliberate voice about a vehicle and a timing window on the expressway. She hadn't understood it fully in the moment. She had understood it completely when the tanker jackknifed and the hands came through the door. Commander Balagun had coordinated the entire thing. But it went further than that. Zara had been doing what curious 17-year-olds with access to their father's household occasionally do, reading things she wasn't supposed to read. Emails, documents left open on a study desk. And over several months, she had assembled a picture of something deeply wrong inside cross-continental construction. Money routed through shell accounts. Contracts awarded to ghost companies. Signatures on documents her father would never have signed. Commander Balagun wasn't working alone. He was working with Roland Okonkwo's most trusted board director, a man named Victor Salo, who had been with the company since the beginning and who smiled at Zara every Christmas like a fond uncle. The kidnapping wasn't about ransom. It was about keeping Zara quiet long enough for a final transfer of funds, a transaction that would strip Roland Okonkwo of a significant portion of his liquid assets, to be completed and untraceable. After that, a missing billionaire's daughter was a liability with a simple solution. Dele listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, the workshop was very quiet. "Does your father know any of this?" he asked. "My father," Zara said carefully, "trusts Commander Balagun more than almost anyone alive. That's why I couldn't just call home. I didn't know who would answer." Dele was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, reached behind the red ledger on the shelf, and produced an old Nokia phone, the kind that made calls and did nothing else, the kind that couldn't be tracked by anything more sophisticated than a direct conversation. "My cousin Tund," he said, "works IT security at a bank on Lagos Island. He knows people." He paused. "Not your father's people, different people." Zara looked at the phone, then at Dele. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "You could have 50 million naira by morning." Dele looked at her with the patient expression of someone answering a question they consider to have an obvious answer. "Because you swept my floor," he said simply. "People who want to use you don't sweep your floor." He handed her the Nokia. Outside on the dark street, a black SUV and 2 additional vehicles had just turned onto the road leading to the workshop. And Commander Balagun, sitting in the front passenger seat of the lead car, was already reaching for his own phone. The final window was closing. And nobody had told Roland Okonkwo his daughter was 3 streets from the Oshodi underpass, because the man whose job it was to tell him was the man driving toward her right now. Tunda Demi arrived at the workshop at 1:15 a.m. on an Okada, laptop bag across his chest, looking like a man who had been pulled from sleep mid-dream, which he had, and who had decided to show up anyway, which said everything about the kind of family Dele came from. He was 28, wiry. with quick, precise eyes behind thick-framed glasses, wearing a Davido concert shirt and bathroom slippers he hadn't thought to change. He took one look at Zara, opened his laptop without ceremony, and said simply, "Talk. I type fast." Zara talked. Tund typed faster. Within 20 minutes, Tund had pulled enough digital thread to confirm what Zara had pieced together from overheard phone calls and open documents. The shell companies were real. The ghost contracts were real. And the final transfer, the one the kidnapping had been designed to protect, was scheduled for 6 a.m., approximately 4 hours away. But it was what Tund found next that made all three of them go very still. Commander Balagun had not acted alone from the beginning. The original architect of the financial fraud was Victor Sallow. That much Zara already knew. But the second name attached to the earliest transactions, buried 3 layers deep inside a holding company registered in Cotonou, was not a name any of them expected. It was the name of Zara's late mother. Amara Okonkwo, who had died in a car accident 8 years ago on the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway when Zara was 9, had apparently signed documents authorizing the initial movement of funds. Documents dated 2 weeks before her death. Zara stared at the screen. "She didn't sign those," she said quietly. The certainty in her voice was absolute. "No," Tund agreed, equally quietly. "The signature is digitally replicated. Someone copied it from her existing company documents." He paused. "Which means your mother didn't die in an accident." The workshop was completely silent, except for the generator. Dele placed a hand briefly on the workbench to steady himself. He looked at Zara, whose face had gone through several expressions in rapid succession before settling into something that was not grief. Grief was too soft a word for it, but the specific controlled fury of a person who has just understood that their pain was manufactured by someone else's greed. There was no more time for stillness. The sound of vehicles outside the gate arrived at the same moment Tund's phone lit up with a message from a contact he had reached earlier. A journalist at Channels Television who was now awake, recording, and had just forwarded everything Tund sent him to 3 separate secure servers and 2 senior officers at the EFCC. "It's out," Tund said. "Whatever happens next, it's already out." Dele moved first. He killed the workshop light, guided Zara and Tund through the back exit into the narrow compound behind the building, and led them at a low run through 2 connecting back streets toward the one place on this part of the mainland he knew had both elevation and visibility, the pedestrian walkway of the Oshodi footbridge. Commander Balagun's men breached the workshop gate 40 seconds after they left. On the footbridge, Dele called Roland Okonkwo directly, the number Zara recited from memory, and handed her the Nokia. When Roland picked up on the first ring, the sound that came from him at the sound of his daughter's voice was not the sound of a billionaire. It was the sound of a father. "Daddy," Zara said, "don't trust Balagun, don't call him, don't tell him anything. I need you to come yourself, only yourself, to the Oshodi footbridge. And I need you to call the EFCC on the way." Roland Okonkwo arrived in 19 minutes in a private car. He drove himself for the first time in 11 years. Commander Balagun and Victor Sallow were arrested before sunrise, Balagun at a filling station on Ikoradu Road, where he had stopped after losing Zara's trail, Sallow at his Banana Island residence, where EFCC officers met him still in his pajamas. The 6 a.m. transfer was intercepted with 4 minutes to spare. The evidence surrounding Amara Okonkwo's death was formally reopened the following week. Roland stood on that footbridge in the gray Lagos pre-dawn and looked at the mechanic who had kept his daughter alive for 2 days with a tarp, a work jacket, and 300 naira worth of akara. And he said the only thing that felt adequate. "Name anything." Dele looked at him with the same patient expression he had given Zara 2 nights ago, the expression of a man to whom the answer was obvious. "Her school fees are paid," Dele said. "My sisters are not." Roland Okonkwo nodded once. Then he did something none of his board directors, associates, or longtime colleagues had seen him do in years. He laughed fully from the chest. 3 months later, Dele's auto repairs relocated to a proper facility in Ajota with 4 hydraulic lifts, 2 apprentices, and a hand-painted sign above the gate that still read, because Dele insisted, God's time is best. Zara visited on the opening day with her father and a plate of akara she had made herself, badly, and was not ashamed of. Some debts are not paid in naira. They are paid in showing up. The most valuable people in your life will rarely arrive with impressive titles. Sometimes they arrive with grease on their hands and a spare pair of slippers, and they protect you not because of what you're worth, but because of who you are. Never overlook the ones who show up quietly. They are often the ones who stay. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and tell us what you learned in the comments below.